You seize what you crave, from sailors lost to all who wrestle within your vast seven-sea embrace. Carry me, Mary, through your dark hold. Fight with me, Mary, and vanquish those who trespass your domain. Your time has come, my ditty, to invoke with no repentant. Hold close, my Mary, until only sea and abyss remains, and your boundless ocean's weight is aimed. Thus my biddy, when all is nothing and all has departed, when the echoes fade from your watery grave, it will be then, my nautical Mary, all will be right. A farewell ode. I'll be there, Mary, in your chasms deep, standing ready to fight for you with all your brine, salt, and sea. For this I covenant, my Mary of the deep. For this I vow, nautical Mary. For you I vow, and for you I bloody hate. I carried the weight, all of it, locked it down tight, buried it deep. For now, the faces of those I'd loved, those I'd lost, fueled a cold, unyielding fire within me. A storm was brewing. It always had been. Always on the cusp of taking me. And now I was the wave about to break upon it. I'd made my peace with death long ago. I'd say it again, with the odds stacked against me, and countless levels between. I began my long, arduous trudge into the unknown. The emergency lights, shattered in the earlier implosion, offered no guidance. My only light was the faint glow of my wrist-mounted dive computer. The initial chaos of the implosion had long subsided. Now an unsettling stillness reigned, broken only by the trace hum of the facility's surviving systems. The Leviathan around me, injured but not out. I moved with purpose, my hands gliding along bulkheads, my fins propelling me deeper into the belly of the beast. My immediate goal was simple: get to the deeper levels. The heart of the operation, as my intel had put it, was somewhere in the lower sections, far below my current position. And hoping the structural integrity held just long enough for me to pass. The further I descended, the more the water pressure became a physical presence. Dull ache in my ears. Sections of the facility now lay in ruins, twisted metal and shattered glass framing gaping holes where intact corridors once were. I bypassed flooded laboratories and silent barracks, the ghostly echoes of their former occupants. My depleted air tanks were a ticking clock. Without my standard rebreather, every breath was precious. Each intake a finite resource, bringing me closer to the limit. I had to assume the Nazis had their own divers, specialized units designed for deep water recovery or counterinsurgency. The thought of encountering one in these dark, confined spaces was rattling. A more immediate fear than even the crushing depths. As I approached what my schematics indicated was a major junction, as I slowly made my way through the service corridors, I could now distinctly overhear the heavy machinery operating with a deliberate, almost unnatural rhythm. My intel had been vague on the specific nature of the time portal window, but this sound suggested something immense, something active. I was definitely headed in the right direction. I peered through a fractured viewport into a vast, unlit chamber. The rhythmic thrumming intensified, now accompanied by a subtle, almost imperceptible pulsation in the water itself. A faint, ethereal blue light pulsed from the far side of the chamber, growing brighter with each thrum, then dimming, only to pulse again. It was hypnotic, terrifying. I had to be getting agonizingly close. I had no firearms, only the tools of my trade. My diver's knife, a few demolition charges, and the grim determination born of a lifetime spent in the dark deep. The path ahead was unknown, shrouded in the pulsing blue light and the rhythmic thrum of something unspeakable. But I knew one thing: there was no turning back. Maddox showed I was now firmly within the unaffected section of the facility, a chilling thought given the utter devastation I'd just navigated above. This was their true stronghold, an untouched core of their operations, protected, incredibly deep, and undeniably teeming with unseen dangers. And I still faced a dizzying descent of 40 to 50 levels, spiraling further into the crushing belly of this metal leviathan. I located an access hatch. The heavy wheel turned with a well-oiled smoothness that felt almost unnerving, a silent promise of the hidden world beyond. As the hatch hissed open, it wasn't the expected rush of water that met me, but a sudden, startling whoosh of compressed air. I ripped off my helmet, gulping in the recycled, metallic-scented air. My lungs burned with the sudden change, but the relief was immediate, visceral. This meant no more easy passage, no more silent aquatic maneuvering. This meant air and with air guards. There were no debris fields here, no twisted girders, no shattered equipment. This was the active core, where the true, unspeakable work of the Third Reich's deep-sea ambitions was being forged. My wrist-mounted dive computer now served primarily as a depth gauge and a rapidly dwindling air supply readout from the reserve tank still attached to my back. A grim reminder that if I had to go back into the water, my time was severely limited. The heavy weight of my dive suit, a blessing in the water, now felt cumbersome, restricting. I moved with a heightened, almost hyper-aware caution. And chillingly, the distinct murmur of German voices. They were here, deep within their submerged fortress, conducting their grim work. The prospect of encountering their elite guards, armed and ready, was a cold, constricting knot in my gut. In these confined metal passages, a single, unforeseen confrontation could mean not just failure, but a quick, brutal end. I pressed on, guided by the insistent magnetic pull of the loudest thrumming, drawn inexorably towards whatever impossible science they were conducting. My intel hadn't been specific about the time portal window, only that it was their ultimate, horrifying goal. Whatever it was, the intensity of its presence indicated it was terrifyingly close. The deeper I ventured, the stranger the architecture became. Less like a submarine or a conventional deep-sea base, it began to resemble some alien construct, replaced by a smooth, dark material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating an unsettling sense of boundless, light-devouring space. The air itself grew colder, a bone-chilling freeze that pierced even the thickest insulation of my dive suit, raising goosebumps on my skin. This was a cold born not just of the deep, but of something far more sinister. I began to notice the faint clanking sound and the distant whir of possibly a massive piece of machinery, as well as the distinct murmur of German voices. They were close and deep within their submerged fortress, conducting God knows what temporal calamity. And I was on a direct collision course to them. Idiotic, but what other choice did I have? The future of the goddamn world was potentially at stake. Goddamn. One couldn't make this shit up, but I was dead set on the grim work ahead. I was running low of viable options, thus the best I could come up with was to stay in the shadows and kill, then one at a time, when the soldiers were separated. It was a daunting challenge, and probably a one-way trip. But if I'd learned anything during my time in the abyss, it was that fear is a strong motivator. And something long ago, my Uncle John had told me, that being one's violence of action. My uncle that night over beers devolved to me that while in his time in Vietnam, it had been their platoon of seek and destroy Manta. He then went on to say that the forceful and aggressive application of speed, strength, surprise, and aggression to overwhelm his opponent is critical in the din. Caleb, he said, and taking a swig of his Coors Light, it's all about maximizing impact and achieving dominance by acting decisively and without goddamn hesitation. Imagine for a moment, Caleb. You're driving down the road late at night and wham! You hit a deer. You see Kid. There's that, well, window of time, a fleeting moment where your eyes lock on the deers. You see, you both know what's to come. The term deer in headlights rings disturbingly true. It can't move. The deer that is, it's involuntarily ingrained. So you see Caleb, in a combat situation, or any high-stakes situation, that's your moment, your juncture. That's when you enact Violence. My uncle that night hammered this point to me. Speed, strength, surprise, and aggression imposing your will on the enemy. Now I was looking to ring those words true, but the prospect of encountering SS soldiers, armed and ready, was a cold, constricting knot in my gut. And in these confined metal passages, a single unforeseen confrontation could mean not just failure, but a quick, brutal end. I pressed on, guided by the insistent magnetic pull of the inevitable confrontation. It drew me, tugged me inexorably towards whatever impossible science they were conducting. Each level I descended, each curving corridor I navigated, each silent, illuminated bulkhead I passed, brought me closer to the source of that unearthly blue light and the rhythmic pulse that vibrated deep in my teeth. This was a cold born not just of the deep, but of something far more sinister. I was no longer just a diver. I was an intruder in a realm that defied conventional logic, a place where the very fabric of time might be warped and twisted by the monstrous device I sought, and with every agonizing foot I descended, the chilling realization pressed in with the increasing pressure of the structure. I was undeniably getting closer to the very heart of this dark deep, and whatever unspeakable horrors lay within awaited my arrival.
Nach der Überlegung werde ich eine Option anbieten, die gut funktioniert. Hier ist die deutsche Übersetzung. Nicht denken, einfach machen. Bringt mir den Kopf der Yankees. Jetzt!
I crouched low to the metallic deck and peered around the sharp corner. Ahead, an SS soldier stood with his back to me, rifle held at attention. Every instinct screamed caution, but time was a luxury I didn't have. I inched closer, a ghost in the sterile gleam of the corridor, until I was within striking distance. With a silent surge, I lunged, plunging my diver's knife deep into the back of his neck. He gasped, a horrific wet gurgle, and crumpled backward, the momentum sending him crashing into me. I stumbled, the dead weight of his body landing squarely on top of mine, pinning me momentarily. Ignoring the repulsive sound, I shoved him aside, the cool metal of the deck against my back. Adrenaline surged, a fiery torrent in my veins, but I forced myself to take a quick, centering breath. This was just the beginning. The next confrontation was anything but clean. Around another bend, a young German soldier leaned against a bulkhead, a cigarette dangling from his lips, his rifle propped lazily beside him. I approached, moving like a phantom, but in the oppressive silence of the deep, my knife scraped, a tiny metallic shriek against an exposed pipe. My stealth was blown. The soldier's head snapped in my direction, eyes wide with dawning recognition. He lunged for his rifle. With no other choice, I lunged too, my hand closing around the cold steel of the barrel, wrenching it away from his grasp. He struggled, a desperate, guttural cry tearing from his throat, managing to get off a single wild round that ricocheted off the bulkhead before my knife found its mark, burying itself between his second and third ribs. He buckled, a strangled gasp escaping his lips, and collapsed. Almost immediately, shouts erupted in German from adjacent sectors, sharp and guttural. My cover was utterly blown. No time for finesse now. I ripped the rifle from the dead soldier's grip, fumbling to secure the extra magazines from his webbing. Deer in headlights, I muttered, the phrase a bitter, self-deprecating mantra. Deer in fucking headlights. My cautious creep turned into a quickening stride, then a full-blown sprint. They'd be expecting a careful, methodical approach from an infiltrator. They wouldn't expect a one-man rampage, a desperate charge into the very heart of their stronghold. Their surprise was my only weapon now. I was a tidal wave, and the floodgates had just opened. The metal corridors blurred as I pushed my suit, still cumbersome from its deep-water origins, into an all-out sprint. The heavy boots I'd kept on for the unexpected dry environment slammed against the deck plates with each stride, a loud, undeniable rhythm. The distant shouts of the Germans grew closer, morphing into distinct voices, the sharp crack of their boots on metal. I rounded another bend, skidding slightly, and saw them, a patrol of 3 SS soldiers, rifles raised, already fanning out, their faces contorted in surprise and alarm. There was no time to think, no time for tactics. My stolen rifle felt awkwardly light, its unfamiliar balance a disadvantage. I swung it up, squeezing the trigger before they could fully acquire me. A burst of fire ripped through the sterile air, the sound deafening in the confined space. One soldier screamed, clutching his chest, his rifle clattering to the ground. The other two dove for cover behind some equipment crates. I didn't stop, spraying a few more rounds to keep their heads down. I bounded past the fallen man, adrenaline surging, the metallic tang of gun smoke filling my nostrils. Every turn brought the risk of more encounters, but staying in one place was a death sentence. The glowing panels lining the corridors provided unforgiving illumination, leaving no shadow to hide in. I could hear their shouts now, clearer, closer, coordinating their movements. They were good, too good. My training honed in the silent, forgiving depths was ill-suited for this close-quarters combat. My internal compass, a lifetime of navigating confined spaces, guided me. Deeper, always deeper. The thrumming of the time portal was my lodestar, a constant low-frequency hum that vibrated through the deck beneath my feet. Growing steadily in intensity, it was pulling me in, a monstrous siren song in the abyss. I slid through an automated door just as a volley of shots chewed into the wall behind me. The door hissed shut, sealing off the immediate threat, but I knew it was only a temporary reprieve. They would be right behind me. This next section was a steep downward incline, a service ramp spiraling into the absolute depths of the facility. The air grew noticeably colder, a biting chill that seeped into my bones, and the walls shifted again, no longer just metal, but a seamless, dark, almost organic material that seemed to drink the light. The blue pulse from below was now visible, a faint but growing luminescence at the very bottom of the spiraling ramp, casting eerie, shifting shadows that danced like phantoms ahead of me. My breaths were ragged, my muscles screaming. My dive suit felt like a lead weight, and the stolen rifle, clutched tightly, felt more like a burden than a weapon. But the faces of Jason, of Mary, of everyone I'd lost burned in my mind, a fierce, protective fire. No turning back. Never. I sprinted down the ramp, the thrumming now a deafening vibration that rattled my teeth. The blue light pulsed, expanding, swallowing the darkness, revealing what lay at the bottom of the long, spiraling descent. Whatever secrets this dark deep held, I was about to find them. The bottom of the ramp opened into a chamber. It wasn't a machine as I'd imagined, not gears and wires, but a shimmering aperture, a tear in the fabric of reality itself, swirling with colors that defied earthly description. It pulsed with an energy that was not just audibly, but a resonance that felt both alien and strangely familiar. But the twist of it all wasn't the portal, but the gut punch hadn't yet come. Standing before the portal in what appeared to be more modern-looking Nazi uniforms were dozens of soldiers, and then my stomach plummeted, deeper than I thought possible. My knees buckled, and I dropped to the floor. Standing amongst the soldiers, directing their actions with an air of cold authority, was a man I knew. A man who could not be here. Should not be here. It was a friend I'd had lost. It was Jason, and not the broken, haunted Jason who had confided in me years ago. No, this Jason was different. Confident, his eyes sharp and calculating. A subtle, almost imperceptible air of otherness about him. He wore a pristine German uniform, not of this time. Then before I could take cover, he turned, as if sensing my presence, his eyes met mine. It was as if time stood still, and across the vast chamber, there was a flicker of something, maybe something the likes of recognition to his face. Before his face settled into a cool, professional neutrality, he then gave me a disappointed look, his expression subtly conveying regret for what was inevitably to come. He raised a hand, and the soldiers instantly turned their weapons upon me. And if this wasn't enough to shatter my grip on reality, a voice, amplified and distorted, echoed through the chamber. Intruder identified Sector Gamma 9 compromised. The voice had a chillingly familiar cadence. It was mine. How? How could this be? Why? The voice was a bit older, perhaps, also with an edge of weary resignation, but undeniably my own. Then the true horror began to dawn. This wasn't the past I'd infiltrated. It was the another future. A future where the Germans, using technology far beyond anything I knew, had somehow harnessed the power of time travel, and somehow altered an alternate reality theirs. And Jason? Jason wasn't a victim of a broken marriage and subsequent suicide. He seemingly was part of this. Had this Jason taken a different path in his reality? Then another figure emerged from the shadows, stepping beside Jason. My heart stopped. It was in fact me. A bit older, scarred, with a haunted look in his eyes that mirrored a future I desperately didn't want to see. This me wore a similar uniform. He looked at me, with an expression that was a chilling cocktail of pity and grim determination. Caleb, he spoke, his voice resonating with an authority. It was always going to be you. Then the chilling realization began to crash down on me. The Nazis weren't preparing to change the past. They already had. This wasn't a mission to prevent. It was a temporal game far more complex and terrifying than I could have ever imagined. My older self gave me a sharp, knowing wink, and before I could even process the gesture, a rifle was in my hands, its cold weight definitive. Then the world exploded into chaos. He opened fire, a staccato burst of gunfire tearing through the cavern, and a wave of shock and terror ripped through the SS troops. They were caught completely off guard, their shouts of alarm swallowed by the violent symphony of gunfire. To my dismay, Jason joined the fray, his own rifle roaring as he laid down a hail of lead. The remaining soldiers, their ranks decimated, scattered like frightened rabbits. I was frozen for a moment, my mind reeling, the sudden violence a surreal, jarring shock. But then instinct took over. I raised the rifle, my hands trembling slightly, and aimed at a group of soldiers who had taken cover behind a control panel. My shots were true. 2 of them crumpled, and the third dropped with a scream, clutching a bloody shoulder. Jason and my older self were a blur of motion, their movements fluid and practiced. They moved with a chilling efficiency that spoke of a lifetime of combat, flanking the last holdouts and silencing them with a brutal finality. When the smoke finally cleared and the silence returned, they stood before me, their faces grim. The air was thick with the acrid smell of cordite and the metallic tang of blood. The bodies of the soldiers lay scattered like forgotten dolls, their faces frozen in a final expression of shock and terror. "I don't understand," I stammered, the words trailing off into the expanse. Jason calmly ejected his spent magazine, a cold, mechanical click cutting through the tension.
"I didn't make it in your world, huh? I'm sorry for that,"
he said, his voice genuine.
"But it looks like you were a good friend to him, Caleb. I'm sure he appreciated that."
My eyes moist with emotion and stomach knotted, for here stood a man I knew. A friend I had lost. A friend I had mourned. He then nodded toward my older self.
"You've got questions, so let me do my best to explain. What we are about to tell you may not at this moment rectify all, but there will be a point it will. So, well, the Nazis in the realm we're from, you see, friend, they won the war."
He took a deep breath and began. His words cut deep into contemplations I never dreamt of formulating. He then continued.
"Well, Caleb, you see, these bastards have been ruling with an iron fist ever since. And well, Caleb here from my timeline here, and I were, well, roped into this mess, tasked with helping construct this facility."
He paused, a grim look on his face.
"We were brought here from our time under false pretenses, just like you."
My older self stepped forward, his eyes burning with a desperate fire. "And when we realized another version of me existed in this dimension, we threw a Hail Mary. It was a desperate gamble, a long shot, but we had to try." His words cut deep, hit hard, slowly revealing, slowly causing a paradigm shift in my reeling head. "So we reached out to your employer, subsequently manipulating those events to bring you here. In a way, it had been me. It always had been me. You must understand that taking control of this portal was the one chance we had to right all the wrongs inflicted on our world. It's the key to undoing a century of oppression and death in our world." I could only nod, the gravity of their words finally sinking in, even as my mind reeled from the bloodshed. The weight of their mission, the immense scale of what they were trying to accomplish, was staggering. I looked from my older self to Jason, 2 men who had lived a life of war and loss, fighting for a future that was rightfully theirs. Jason, seeing the look on my face, pointed and gave a slight grin.
"Genius taking out those higher decks."
He said, the word a low growl of approval. "So what now?" I asked, my voice still shaky. "Now we go our separate ways," my older self said. "You back to your life on the surface, and us back to ours, and hopefully, we correct for the better. We give our world a second chance." He then went on to explain that they had set the temporal portal to send me back days before I ever stepped foot in this bloody facility. A part of me wanted to argue to stay and help, but seeing the resolute look on their faces, I knew there was no choice. This was their fight, not mine. I gave a reluctant nod, and with a final look of gratitude, they watched me as I cautiously stepped into the humming vortex. The world became a dizzying swirl of light and sound, and a final plea from my older self echoed in my ears. Say no. I braced myself for a journey back to a past I was now determined to protect. A past where the Nazis were defeated, and where my friends, my family, and my world were still safe. I knew I had a second chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. I awoke in my bed to my cell phone ringing. It was Duke, my employer.